morning, everyone. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Danae. How we doing? We're in June.
We are officially in June, and it is still hot. It is hot.
It's hot, but it's a beautiful day here in hot Atlanta.
Yeah, baby. Hey, guess what?
What?
I'm going to go back to your era.
Oh.
I was going to sing, but, I just think today's not the time to sing this one. It's a little high, but I want to see if you remember this song.
All right, shoot it.
We are stardust. We are golden. We are billion-year-old carbon. Sing it with me. And we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. Oh, that's bad singing. You remember that song?
Which is why I don't sing. Of course. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, 1969.
Yes. I was but a baby.
You were. Where I was a senior in high school. We weren't dating then, just to make this clear to everyone.
I wasn't actually a baby.
Baby. And so, 1969, what a wild time to grow up.
Woodstock, yep.
It was a great era of time to be senior in high school. 1969, a lot happened in that decade.
Well, I didn't get to go to Woodstock, but I can tell you that the ripple effect had started. And when I was a teenager, man, it was just a time of awakening.
Absolutely. Time of awakening in many different ways. What's funny is I had two lives at that time. One is all my friends and I had watched the British invasion, the Beatles, and everything that led up to Woodstock that whole decade. And yet at the same time, I was going to a fundamentalist church, and the older generation had absolutely no clue what was going on in my life in terms of what the music was conveying and what the issues were for those of us that were beginning to rethink the things that had been handed down.
But what you said, religion, church was a very big part of our lives when we were younger. So
yes.
The music and, religion, theologians, they were bombarding our brain and influencing us from both sides. But this song, back when I was a teenager and we were singing it, and it was like, we got to get back to the garden, man.
Right.
We got to get away from all the negativity and the war that I knew nothing about. I knew there was something going on, but everything was just painted in this bleak picture, and we needed to get back to this, this misconception and what we're going to talk about, a time of perfection. And that became a phrase. So that, again, in Woodstock, that was a big popular song, Get Back to the Garden. But much of Christianity that we grew up in refers to this time as the time before the fall of man.
Right.
And of course, we take issue with that because I always think about things in light of having children now that when I had children when I was young, and now that I look back on them, I listen to what people claim is God's will, and I ask, is that what I'd want for my own children? And I'm not going to get into a theological discussion right now, but I just want to offer an idea of whether the goal of life is to actually go back or to move forward.
Yeah.
I mean, right? I love the baby stage. We have a 4-month-old. Happy birthday yesterday, Hadley. 4 months old.
Yeah.
And it is so amazing to watch this little baby. But I don't want to keep her in a baby stage, because this is when she is totally unconscious of who she is.
Yes, exactly. No one as an infant to end up someday with an infant that's 20, 30, 40 years old.
Right.
Infancy, you're right. It's really cute. It's total naivete, unconsciousness of so many things, et cetera, et cetera.
We may wish when they become teenagers or became that we could knock them unconscious. No. Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. Not a parenting show.
No.
Don't take that advice.
No, exactly.
So this is what we're going to talk about, going back to a time of what I call unconsciousness. And I don't disagree with phrases like, do you remember who you were before the world told you who you should be, or a sentiment behind the phrase of finding yourself is actually returning to yourself. I get what the message is behind it, that we get clouded with influences that cause us to build up a defense or wear masks. That I understand. But I think that's just going back to unawareness.
Right, exactly. And there's a reason why. Let me go back to your Woodstock thing as far as why do people want to go back to this supposed time of the past that was a time of perfection? Well, in the Woodstock eras, this is the first time I became aware of the term commune. And communes were this idyllic utopian realm where you could get some other families, and you would withdraw from the society that was the cause of all the problems that you had. And you thought, if we went into this commune, then those of us wanted to live off the land. Those were all good principles. We wanted to live in peace. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, living in peace, et cetera, et cetera. But the reason the commune did not last, the reason that it failed, was because people believed that the way to love yourself, which you're going to get into this with loving your own number and what it includes when you love your own number, people really believed, Danae, that if we went and withdrew and we had these ideals, that we would live in a place where those problems would never exist, where problems would never exist. And that was the deceit of going back, was that if I go back, I'm going back into a time when everything was good and everything in the world was right with the world. And that's the way that I eliminate problems, and eliminating problems is the way that I'm going to find, my peace and happiness.
But that's the deceptive thinking, is that there is a going back to a time of unconsciousness, and that we will be able to exist in peace. This is the problem when people say, oh, we just need to go back to the good old days. Let's get back to the good old days.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, there were a lot of things going on in the good old days that we have now become aware of, that we would not want to go back to. But it's that idea of, I can forget the problems of today and go back to a time of what people call is perfection. And I want to talk about the word perfection in a minute, but let me just say first, one of our kids has recently began looking at the Enneagram. And since this is a show about the Enneagram, I want to talk about him. And it's just been within the past week or so. Mm-hmm. And it was so funny because here you and I have been on this journey for, 10 years. Yeah. And we don't say, oh, you guys, look, you need to read this. You need to read this. We just keep doing it. We keep living it. So now he's looking into it and reading some books. And he sent me a text and he said, it's like someone's been reading my diary or watching all my life. And he texted and he said, I'm the biggest 3 I know. Of course I have to be because I'm a 3. And then he put LOL.
Yeah, exactly. It was his time to come to that awakening, right?
Well, yeah. And if you know much about being a 3, then that will strike you as very funny. That comment was very funny. And he knew it was. That's why he said it that way.
And what's interesting there is you're getting, you mentioned the part about living this. The Enneagram is not a book of rules. It's not some type of dogma or creed that we have given to the kids. You need to read this book. How many times have people made the statement to you, Danae, how do I get my
spouse
or
kid
to read this book or to do this thing? And one of the principles that you and I came to many years ago with this and other things in our lives was that the most effective thing you and I can do is not give them a book to read. It's to focus on let's you and me go live it. If we want them to have a certain type of marriage, then let's have that marriage. If we want them to be able to process in relationships with their friends or other people or a spouse someday or their children, then let's focus on doing that ourselves.
Yes.
And that actually, I think, is what has led to the conversations we're having now with all four of our kids are significantly different conversations than we were having 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I firmly believe it's because you and I have decided that this, whether it's the Enneagram or whatever it is, the thing we've got to do is first and foremost challenge ourselves to just go live it.
Yeah. I could do a Michael Jackson right here, and I'm starting with the
You already sang once.
Oh, okay. The man in the mirror.
The man in the mirror.
Just start loving who you are and growing in your awareness of your strength.
Yes, absolutely.
So, my dad was a preacher. Did you know that?
If you're asking me, the audience may not know that, but I was well aware of it. And I didn't know your dad because he had already passed away from cancer. And so I unfortunately did not have the pleasure to meet your dad because
great.
I think he and I would have had some enjoyable times together. But yeah, I knew your dad was a preacher.
Yes, of course you did. Because your dad was too. And we've talked about how, of course, we're crazy people. We're both preacher's kids. 2 PKs. I guess it was true. The only boy who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man.
And that's a different podcast, a different day.
I am on
you
fire
are
with the
fire
music
today.
I need to be fired. I don't know.
We should have connected this to the karaoke so you could have had some.
We do have a karaoke machine.
Then we would have gotten sued by the ASCAP people. Oh. But anyway, yeah, that's our background from which we came.
Yes, both of us came from just a very similar background because it was the same fundamental denomination that we've talked about previously, which we are not associated with anymore. But my dad, who really was kind of a rebel, and he challenged a lot of the traditional thinking at the time, but I do remember him talking about the word perfection. And that, again, goes back to this concept or misconception that there is a place that we will return to where there's total perfection. But Daddy used to say that really means complete or whole. So if we desire perfection, it doesn't mean that we hope to be without flaw. The whole of who we are is everything we are. It's everything we were, everything we are now, and everything we will be. We are perfect now. But what we do is we continue to evolve in the awareness of this perfection, not try to escape who we are.
That's right. And for me, Danae, that gets back to the theme of your podcast. Loving your number, again, is not trying to escape Woodstock, blah, blah, blah. It's not carrying it as a judgmental burden. Rather, loving your number is realizing that your essence, the essence of every human being is the same as I see and believe the nature of humanity and the human value equation. I believe we all have that same value. Well, the essence of all of us is that perfect essence, and we have one of 9 perspectives of it. And the purpose of life is to grow in my consciousness of the essence that I am and always have been. And so rather than going back, I'm growing forward in learning and becoming more aware of my beautiful essence, just like every other human being has that same beautiful essence.
Exactly. We're not growing away from consciousness. I just want to keep driving that point home. We're not going back to where we're unconscious. We're moving into more consciousness. Otherwise, we simply just return to being unaware.
That's right. And that's not what it means to love your number. To love your number is to fully embrace all that comes with it on both sides of the coin. So there are challenges I have as a 9, and I know what those challenges are. And if I really, truly love my number, I will use those challenges in the field of awareness that you are pointing to here to say, how can I grow better tomorrow?
And even areas that I see as great parts of being part of my personality, always looking for the silver lining or turning things into a positive. Actually, I became aware. And personally, this is a very personal thing, but I became aware that this was really a detriment to my children when I just tried to not allow them to know that there were problems in the world, that I was facing challenges, that we had some really hard times in the early days. And just to put on this, the happy attitude, which I thought was just a great thing. Just, hey, let's everybody look away from the hard part and let me make your life just pleasant. Mm-hmm. And so I did this with the kids. And honestly, when they got older, it really was a shock to find out some of the problems that we were dealing with, that most people deal with. But
of course. So
for me, I would not want to change that. I have this desire to see the bright side of life. But what I want to do is become aware of how this affects my health. It affected the health of my children. This is not trying to put away a part of who I am. It's growing in the awareness of who I am. I don't want to become less conscious of any of my weaknesses or my strengths. But what I want to do is become more whole.
Yeah.
Go back to that word perfect. I just want to strive for wholeness, not emptiness.
Right. And that comes through being aware, aware of those things. Otherwise, we go through life and I'm causing pain and suffering to myself or pain and suffering to others, and I'm unaware that I'm doing that. Well, how does that play out then in our relationship and our marriage in the things that I'm unaware of? Well, it's going to mean that my relationship with you suffers, or with the kids suffers. So what I really want is I want to be able to reflect back on a day and understand, I see where my weakness in this area or this area came out. I see where I personally am experiencing pain and suffering, and I've caused others to do that. And rather than, again, try to escape it, or rather than internalizing it and just carrying it as guilt or shame or some type of thing that's going to rub raw on me inside, or be afraid to actually admit it, be afraid to actually sit down and have a discussion with you about it, be afraid to be vulnerable, as Brene Brown would say. Those are the things that actually are showing that I am not loving my number. Because if I really love my number, I'm going to want to know everything I can from that number.
Absolutely.
Including those things that are holding back a more robust relationship in marriage and raising kids in every other way.
I was just having a conversation with someone yesterday, and we were talking about fear. And I love this little acronym that I heard years ago, that fear just means false evidence appearing real.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think when we let fear of what we've discovered about something that may be a weakness that we're dealing with, even something that seems good on the outside, and then we discover, oh man, that, like you and I have talked about, and not to dish you, but we know.
Oh, we can edit this.
But there were times that there was conflict in the family, and your desire to keep peace.
Yep, peacemaker. I'm a 9.
You were the peacemaker. Mm-hmm. Actually, we discovered later, was building a wall between the parties that were having a conflict. And so the great thing about being a peacemaker is not something you want to put away. And so you don't say, oh, I'm living in fear that this is going to happen again. No, it's becoming aware that this is not the thing that is going to keep me from growing in who I am.
Well, the things that lead to peace, and again, I've got to give you props on your song you picked today, getting back to the garden, the Woodstock theme. The thing that brings about peace is not ignoring or trying to cover up or act as though real issues don't exist. That is not the way peace is going to happen. The rawness of our humanity, when we deal with that, again, when we bring it to the surface and when we put it out on the table and we actually deal with it, it's going to be uncomfortable. It may even take a while before we can be in the same room together if two people are having a problem with that. But it's the only way we can truly love our number.
Oh, my goodness. Because we got to be real.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that is getting back to that true self we were talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we talked about, his name is Stephen. And what is so fun, I think it's so great, and I've talked about this in the first one, that when I was reading and discovered that I was a 7, I was like, yes, these are great. Yep, that's what I do. And,
yeah.
Yep, that's me.
Easy to love my number.
Oh yeah, it's easy.
Right.
Well, that's what he did. He was like reading. He was like, oh, yep, I'm all those great things.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what 3s do. And then it was like, oh, okay, read on a little bit. It was like, well, okay. Maybe I can be a little overly concerned with what others think of me, or I might have a little problem with competitiveness. But the great thing that I loved about his attitude was he didn't say, well, I'm done with this. He actually was like, I want to know more.
Yeah.
He didn't go, I want to throw this away and not be given any more information.
Yeah.
No, he became thirsty for more.
Yes, and he's obviously at a place where he's decided he wants that for himself, and it's not because, again, you or I were trying to make sure that he read an Enneagram book or any other book. Those are, I think that's Danae, the most difficult thing about bringing maturity into other people's lives is realizing you really can't. What you can do is only, again, model what to the best of your ability. Hey, look, you're always going to, even you and I are growing and will continue to grow as long as we're on the planet.
Always,
so,
yes.
So again, I just know there's a lot of angst about that. This is the second or third time I've mentioned it. But here it is that if you had said to me, well, does Stephen ever talk to you about this, and this? I would have said 5 years ago, 10 years ago, no,
nope.
He doesn't seem to show any interest in that. But you should always say yet.
Yet. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And whether it's through the Enneagram, I'm going to keep saying this is just a tool, or it's through, I don't know, therapy, or anything that helps you come to awareness.
Yeah.
This just happens to be what we're working with right now.
Yes.
But since we've talked about the 3, we've thrown it out that's what he's claiming. And right now looking at his wings and going, hey, wait, what is this thing? So, but let me just give you the overview of a type 3, just in case somebody doesn't know. The 3s are self-assured, attractive and charming, ambitious, competent, and energetic. So, of course, he's going to be like, yes.
Tell me more.
Tell me more. They can also be a little status conscious and highly driven for advancement. They are diplomatic and poised, but can also be overly concerned with their image and what others think of them. Mm-hmm. They typically have problems with workaholism and competitiveness. Mm-hmm. But at their best, they are self-accepting, authentic, everything they seem to be role models who inspire others. So, of course, he read all of the description and was like, yes. Oh, well, okay. But at my best, this is who I can be.
Yes.
And it was a beautiful time of discovery. Again, I say it's, turn the lights on, the energy gets flowing in that direction.
Yeah, exactly. And it was because of that, I think the way that's structured in the Enneagram books, it's nice that you start out with that and that you find the things that you really are good at, because if they started with the things you weren't good at, you probably wouldn't be enticed to keep reading.
Right.
And the thing is, he kept reading. And then when he encountered the things that for him were the challenge of that particular number, again, rather than saying, well, I'm out of here, he's at a place in his life where he's like, wow, I'd really like to learn, but that is me. And that is absolutely, I hate to admit it. I mean, he said this to me. I hate to admit this, but yeah, I have a real struggle with that. Well, welcome to the world, as you say, of reality.
Yes, of consciousness.
Yes. And it's okay. Love that about yourself, not in the sense that you accept it, but in the sense that now that you're aware of it, you can do something about it.
Threes do amazing things. We know several threes, and they are so bent on accomplishment. Well, you need these healthy threes in the world because they do get stuff done, and they know how good it feels to develop themselves and contribute their abilities to the world. They're very motivating. So if you've ever been around a healthy three, you don't know that. You may not know that. You don't have to know their Enneagram number, but you know that energy. You know these are the people who inspired you to go for it, to do more than you thought you were capable of. I love my threes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And they help make this world go round.
They do. And I've been asking people, what do you love about your number? And I got a very succinct message from a girl named Ellen. And she said, I love that people know they can rely on me to get beep done. Thank you, Ellen, for that contribution.
Yep. Yeah, that is very true. So basically, if we need to get back to the garden, Danae, perhaps it's because we realize that we have weeds in that garden and it's okay. Our job is to go in there and do the weeding so that that garden can produce the beautiful results that really are reflective of its true nature.
Look at you. I see what you did there. A little garden metaphor. Very well played.
Well, you had to had to come full circle here.
Well, I'm grateful for the threes in my life. I hope you get to discover the joy of who you truly are by loving your own number. Thank you. See you soon.